Captain's log 04/03/26. Tonight I'm going to talk about some culture and modern life and kind of compare it a little bit to maybe how things used to be in the past, even sometimes like our recent past, and things that we remember, at least some of us old enough to remember, like the analog days. And that comparison stems from the meaning and the shared structure that society has and had in the past. Um, so these days, everything is just kind of fake and gay, is how you can boil it down to basically. It's a narrative that's kind of shoved down your throat. Um, and it's just like consumption and cheap entertainment and basically anything that to grab your attention and fake simulation, basically just anything to make you comfortable and steal your attention. And that's kind of where we're at right now. If you think of what everything's kind of designed for, social media, the movies, the TV shows, it's all just there to grab your attention and try to hold as much attention in the whole, not just like individually, but many people. And that's how they make money. That's how like these companies gain money and power. And the governments, it's a big popularity match. It's like none of them actually care to fix any of the problems. So it is we are in a sad state. It seems we're in a sad state of being right now. And that's not to say we have to, like, obviously, and individually you don't have to be there either, and I'm going to talk on that later this video. But like, let's jump back in time. And when we think of like the ancient world and what we know of the ancient world and the pre-modern world, they had entertainment, like they had stories and plays, but these things were there to teach and they always had a lesson, and they always had cultural value, and they were art and beautiful, and they had meaning. And honestly, like for most of human history, people lived in cultures where like life was structured around meaning rather than consumption. And that makes a huge difference in life. That makes a huge difference in your society, makes a huge difference in your personal life. That doesn't mean life was easy like, obviously we live in what would be considered the easiest times of human history. You know, we live lives of luxury and comfort. Um, but pre-modern history societies were oriented more towards purpose and transcendence and creation. So I imagine there was a general feeling of value, a general feeling of togetherness, a general feeling of purpose. They probably didn't have these existential crises that, you know, often we have in modern life, and trying to find our purpose and, hey, what am I here for? You know, they had hard lives, but they also had meaningful lives, and that's huge. And having a hard life doesn't mean it's a bad life. In fact, if you let's say, like, if you're a Christian like I am, if you look at the values and ethics in a religion like Christianity, you see the importance of having struggle and having those tough times. Excuse me. In fact, through struggle is where you often find God, and that's been true in my life personally. I think that's true in many people's lives. So, we strive as humans. It's natural as creatures to strive for comfort, but it's comfort isn't the goal that we should necessarily be seeking. There's always higher goals. There's always things that are beyond yourself that bring purpose to life. And I think back in the day they kind of understood that. I think especially like ancient times, people had an understanding as a collective, as a society, of what that meant. And life was tough and short, and they really tried to live it. And they didn't worry about the things that we worry about. Um, so yeah, I think that pre-modern history, they had like a unified story. So in that I mean, like, the whole as a whole nation, let's say a European nation, they would have had a unifying story, which would have been Christianity. They were you know all basically all theocracies of some sort. They were monarchies, but you know through God. So they had that kind of unifying story, and no matter what, you were the same as your neighbor in that way. It'd be the same in, like, Confucian China. um in Roman Greece, they had their civic virtue. Yeah, it's just, like, places had, like, nations had that unifying story. So, and that kind of gave people, you know answers to why life mattered, what their role was, what a good life looked like. And it was everything was, like, outside of yourself. Like, you worked hard, for God or your gods, or for your society or for your nation. A good life was honoring that, and life and death mattered a lot. And that's why you see these, like, this art that came out of that is, like, you think of the cathedrals and the statues and everything that came out of that you started a job that you knew you were never going to see the end, but somebody at some point would. And it you know was beyond any single person that was there. It was beyond any single person, even the king, you know even the monarch and the pope and everybody who was around. these projects and masterpieces were beyond any individual person. It was for the greater good of society and everyone and the future generations. And we just like, we don't think that way anymore. Like nobody thinks about that. Even families barely, like, you see on the internet, like, people are, well, I can't take the money to the grave, so I might as well spend it, and things like that. And nobody thinks of like, okay, well, like, what am I giving back to society? What am I giving back to my family? What am I building for the future? And I think that's like, it shows in so many ways, and like especially in the West, like you see the decline of our civilization and our societies, and then you mix all these other cultures in with that, who clearly don't have the same morals and values that we do, and it just exasperates it, and the problem just like compounds. And we live in these individualist societies, and there's just like nothing. It's the reason it doesn't feel good. Like, it's the reason that, like, there's I don't think people have a lot of hope in that case, because if you're not building for the future, then what is it for? Like, like, what are you leaving behind? So, I think that there's a lot of people that don't really think about that stuff, and I think it's getting worse, to be honest. Excuse me. And with that, like, we've lost something that, like, the ancients probably had in abundance, and like that would have been hope and imagination, and for the future, and just in general, like, you just telling their stories, and how they built beautiful things. So they were grand creators, and they also, I think, like, I think part of that is like creative participation, like, in society. So by that I mean, like, people people yearned to participate in society, and their societies were generally built around that in some form. People produce things more than they consume things, and you kind of had to. It was, it wasn't the abundant life that we have, where we have like instant gratification, instant, food on delivery, Uber Eats. We have Amazon delivering whatever crap that you want to fill your house with. Um, you know, Back then, farmers grew food, craftsmen built tools and buildings, and the guilds and whatever produced art and, you know, architecture and whatever technology. And they had scientists that came up with, grand inventions, and people do that now as well, but not to the extent where, like, everybody in some way was like producing things and participating in society. Even like, they're like, a good example is even like festivals and that kind of thing. The people were encouraged to actually like come together and participate, and like participate in things like, I go to mass every Sunday, and you actually participate in mass. You're actually participating in that sacrifice and the sacrament, and that is a direct pull from the past, and how people used to actually celebrate. And people would come together as large groups, and towns, and everybody would have a role, and everybody would help out in some way. And whatever they were doing, singing, dancing, and performing, and storytelling, whatever, and they were like acting in society and not just like spectating. And I find like we as a people generally are spectators. We sit back and watch, watch the circus, watch the sports game, participate in Christmas to an extent, or other holidays to an extent, but a lot of it is sitting and watching movies and TV and ordering shit on Amazon, and you give gifts, but it's oftentimes people stress out about it, and it doesn't have to be that way. And like I think that some like I try to be I enjoy those festivals because I get to see people. I get to like go see my family and enjoy food and things like that. Like enjoy having that, sitting down, having that meal with them. But there's a lot of other stuff, and there's a lot of people who don't get that, and there's a lot of lonely people out there too, and a lot of it can just be like centered around consumption again, and everybody wants to sell you something. And yeah, so it's back back in the day. I think they also had like hope and imagination in a different way as well. You know, they didn't know everything that we do, and we don't really know what, if you go back far enough, we don't know what they knew or didn't know. We don't even know how they built half the shit they built. Like coming from somebody who's in construction, um, there's stuff we couldn't build now. Like there's things that we have no idea how the hell they did it. It's one of those mysteries, and it's this it's one of the reasons I'm like very uh, nerdy about ancient history, and that because it's like these people, we have an idea of them as if they're lesser than us, as if they're like less intelligent for some reason or less knowing, but realistically they obviously knew some stuff, right? And they obviously knew something we don't. So it is this exciting um, topic to delve into if you ever have a chance. But regardless, like through their art and what they've passed down, you can tell like the imagination that these people had, and they painted these beautiful paintings and carved these beautiful carvings to like represent stories, and they had myths and legends and stories to explain the world around them. um and they just like you know imagined possibilities that you know when you think of things like imagining things that never existed before. And that's not, I'm not talking about improving on things like SpaceX nowadays, improving on the spaceship, but that's really cool and that's awesome, and they're doing a great job. But like, I'm talking about somebody who thought, hey, what if humans could fly, right? Like that's a whole nother level. Or any other you know imaginative and inventive, excuse me. As you can tell, I'm still getting over this cold, but any other possibilities that when you're the first person, just like find a way to make it work and think of this idea that, and people just probably, I imagine people would be dismissive. Some of them would probably be like downright scared of you. Like, how can you, like, hey, who's this crazy guy jumping off the roof or whatever, right? Like, uh somebody had to take that first step, right? And somebody had to like they just had so much hope for like that the future would be better than than it was in their time. And it seems like at some point in modern time, it just like that hope for a better future and like a time where your kids would have a better life than you seems like it's gone. And it seems like it's like, if you have kids, you have to like imagine that, hey, it's going to be a little harder for them than when I was a kid. And life's really weird right now, and life's really, really tough for young people, and there's so many things to navigate that we just never had to think of, and like things that we haven't really come to understand yet, like the online stuff and social media, and like how it affects society, and especially children. um, we haven't really come to full understanding of that, and it's just this huge shift in society. Like technology has created many wonderful things, and which is like it's really good, and that's what part of the hope was. Like if you think back in the day, like Leonardo da Vinci, like he was inventing technology. We don't think of it as that because we look back and we're like, oh, technology is an iPhone, but that's something else. But it was, and we have obviously more and more technology every year. We have different things, but our technology created a world where attention is the most valuable resource beyond anything. That might have to be like a whole nother separate video, but it's something to really think about, and what scarce resources and what things are, what things are actually valuable. And attention is probably one of the most valuable resources in the world right now. And we're all being, grabbed by our phones, and just like anything, all this cheap entertainment, and glued to these screens. And everybody, like, if you could only look at it from a third person view and be like, hey, that's my resource, that's my attention being drained from me right now, I think that we would be a lot more careful with that resource. Excuse me. And with that, we're always just locked in on our screens, and entertainment is like, it's stopped being this like occasional experience that I imagine in ancient times you would go and watch a play, like a small play, or somebody would sit down around a fire and tell a story, and everybody would be entertained, and maybe it was the best storyteller in the village, um, about, hey, Ugdug decided to go out and do something stupid again. And the storyteller is this, grand entertainer, and, tells Ugdug's story, and how he fell on hard times with the saber tooth. But you would learn something, and it would be valuable in so many ways, and you were like there, and like in person, and like it was tangible, and it was occasional. It wasn't like it is today. It's just that entertainment is everything. Like you don't get away from it, and we don't want to get away from it. I mean, I'll speak to myself and personal experience. Like when I'm at work, I'm often listening to music or a podcast. Things that would have been, such an occasional, like such an occasional gift, that it's just like you can just at the push of a button, you can have it. You could literally have it 24/7 on in the background. You could have that, and never have to sit in your own thoughts and never have to, be bored or whatever. Like we've never known boredom, and it's not a good thing, to be honest. So it's, yeah, we've become consumers of stimulation, and overstimulated to the point where like our dopamine receptors, everything's shot. We're just walking zombies. We have social media on all the time, streaming platforms, video games, short form videos on the computer and phone, and yeah, it's crazy. And like I didn't delete it, but like I gave up my social media. So like my Instagram, I have Facebook, but I never really use it anyways. Yeah, I think the only time I go on Facebook's for marketplace stuff, which I don't have money to spend, so I won't be on there. But my Instagram, I used to use like all the time. I'd be on it all the time because my buddies are sending me memes and whatever and funny things, and I'm talking to people. I have friends halfway across the world, and that's the only way I really talk to them. And I gave it up for Lent, so unfortunately, I haven't been able to talk to those friends in a little while now. But I'm not sitting and scrolling on whatever little news story or funny meme or whatever the heck is on the homepage, and just scrolling through mindlessly on all this stuff. And I don't miss it. Like I would love to find a way to still have the ability to connect with all those people that I can't connect with every day, and like that I don't really have a better way of connecting with them, and to like be able to keep up with their life in some way, but also not have to sit on a platform where I'm scrolling through an algorithm that's designed to just hold my attention. So, I'm going to find some way of doing that, because I really do think that it's time to just let go of some of these things that are draining you and like draining me. Like I need to just like let go of some of that stuff. And it's addicting, right? Like I would sit there, like you get this dopamine hit obviously, and it creates a habit. But I would sit there after I quit for, it must have been for the first like 2 weeks. I have it where I had to flip through on my phone to get to Instagram, because I didn't want it like on the homepage, like easy to get to. But it became a habit to flip to that thing to find Instagram. So I must have hit it, I don't know, a dozen times, where I started doing. I'd catch myself doing that. I'm like, hey, you're not going on. Like, you gave this up. But it was like, it wasn't me consciously thinking like, oh, I want to go and look on Instagram. It was just like this subconscious, oh, I'm sitting down for break, better check Instagram. And I would catch myself doing it. I'd be like, what the heck am I doing? So we we have this addiction, and the platforms and technologies that we've produced, they're designed for that addiction, because that's how they make money, and that's how they generate value. So they're there to take your attention and hold your attention. Like they're very sophisticated technologies in doing that. And it's like a huge struggle, and it's a huge fight to fight against that. But I think it's super important, and to get back into, you know I'm constantly thinking and lamenting like the things that I used to spend time on. I want to say I used to waste time on them, because I mean I was addicted into like to other things, and I lament that right now because those things were so much better for me than what I have now. And let me explain that because when I was a kid, I was like addicted to reading. I would read books and books and books. And I would draw, like I would doodle and draw, and like I just all the time. Like you couldn't stop me from. I was supposed to be sitting in class listening to the teacher, and I'd either be reading something else that I was interested in or drawing. But I was never addicted. Like I never had video games or any of that stuff. I didn't have any of that. So, I would read all these books, and I was into like fantasy and history and sci-fi and all these things, and imagine these other worlds and create these things. And then I would go home, or I would go home and I go in the garage and I'd build and craft something like some sword or some whatever. Uh, and I was just creating things all the time. And I lament it because like in a lot of ways I've lost that. I think we've all lost that a little bit in by just like sedating ourselves with all the crap that's on the screens. Excuse me. So it really is. We're like zombies. We're like in a trance, and it's good to get back to creating stuff. I want to try to like slowly get off the screen time in every way and get back on creating and drawing and painting and reading. And I don't really have much to craft around here, but like I don't know. I do enough of that at work, I guess. But it's yeah, there's there's so many things out there to there's so many things out there to do. Learn a language. I want to learn Latin. I'm trying to learn Cantonese. I have always would love like I always thought I'd love to learn how to play music of something like guitar or something. Um, all kinds of things. So it's yeah, we basically yeah addicted to all these things. We're it's not good. And in that, I think we kind of like the ancient people had meaning, and we lack this meaning, and people are depressed, and there's a lot going like I always had this thought in my head. It's like people in a lot of like third world societies where they're struggling for food and they're struggling to survive every day, they really don't have like depression the way that we think of it. They're, you know, they have a hard life, and things are not easy, and there's really bad things and terrible things that happen to them. And some of them obviously they live a depressing life in some way, but excuse me, they're not like they have purpose because they're trying to survive. Like survival is their purpose, and they have that to live for. They're struggling to live, and I don't think that that type of person would understand somebody who lives in like a first world country, and they would like that other type of person, like the person struggling to survive. How could they understand someone else who has everything, giving everything up and basically like deciding to call it quits and being depressed and shutting down? Like they just wouldn't get it. And that's what happens because we've replaced purpose with like entertainment and narratives and whatever, and the algorithm. It's like we don't have purpose anymore. So what is there to you how are they pursuing meaning? Like they're unless you have like religion, or you like have a hobby like that matters, crafting something, whatever, or you have good community or exploration. Like, what frontier do we have to explore right now? It's like, what new things, like what new place? You have to like generate that yourself in some way. But if you lack imagination, you know, instead we have, you know, whatever the newest gossip on the phone is, or like whatever celebrity crap's going on, or trends, or whatever consumption. Like, we buy shit. Basically, that's the big one. We buy shit to like numb the pain. And then a lot of people are on drugs. So it's yeah, it's kind of sad. And we have this like zombie society, and everybody's like a zombie. And again, they have like reduced attention spans because of all the dopamine that they've been just like trying to keep up with, trying to like hit that next rush, and just like constantly over dopamine. Like, and you just need to reset. Like, you just need to like stop. And I can imagine, some people go and do those monk retreats and stuff, and I always wonder like what that must be like. You know, you can't speak to anybody. You can't, like, you have no phone, you have no nothing. You are there, you're silent, and you're there for whatever week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And imagine how stir crazy I am. Like, for me, like, speaking for myself, like, it would be very hard, I think. Like, I'm the type of person who loves to get away and get away by myself and go, like, I'll go out into the wilderness in the middle of nowhere. I think I was talking to a friend that lives in the other side of the world, in a place where like they don't have the wilderness that we have in Canada, and they like trying to explain to them like, I will be so far I'll be so far out in the wilderness by myself. Like, there's just nothing for miles and miles. There's no other person for miles and miles. It's just me, and it's so nice and relaxing, but it can be like it can be so hard. I'll still have my phone on me and stuff for emergencies, but it can be so hard to like not reach for the phone and like, hey, and what's society doing right now? Right? Like, but it's so good for you. Like, you can feel that it's good for you, but you also feel this like addiction that hey, I need to see what the heck's going on in the world right now, and what my friends and family and my girlfriend and whoever, like, I it's very good to get away from that sometimes and just try to get out there. So that's, speaking of that, that's something I'm this year like prioritizing if I can. And it doesn't matter if it's just going for a walk in the park, or getting going for a 4 or 5 6 hour drive and getting away from everybody and going out and canoe trips and stuff. Like, I just want to get out in nature and get away for a little bit, because it's so important. Like, it changes everything. So that's gonna be a huge priority in my year this year. And I mean, I say that every year, but life gets busy. But I definitely want to make it more of a priority, anyways. So, but yeah, it's complicated. Life's complicated, and we have a lot of these cultural battles and things that we have to face right now. And like, on top of all this, there's a lot of other things, like, you know these manufactured issues that we face as well, which, you know personally, maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, but personally I believe these are manufactured on purpose, and there's reasons behind a lot of this stuff, but the things that drive people apart and drive division, and things that are purposely to destroy certain cultures and certain societies, and to ruin families, and to prevent community involvement and like communities from like really getting started in first place. So I think there's like all these micro battles that go on as well. It's important to, hey, take a step back and try to create things if you can. Try to consume in like meaningful ways. Read a book, um, go in person to see something. Go, if don't order Uber Eats, go in and sit at a restaurant. Whatever things that you can, and it's okay to be bored. Like try sitting and being bored for a little bit. See what you come up with. Maybe you'll start drawing or painting and whatever. And a lot of us are too busy for that anyways, but it's yeah, it's important, and a lot of the answers can be found in the past, and in if you're faithful, like I am, there's a lot of answers that we found in your faith. And yeah, it's important because society can lose a lot of this stuff, and you can see it now. It's like on the decline, and things can decline very quickly, and it would be very sad if we you know destroyed ourselves because of that. So I think that's enough for tonight. I'm gonna try to get some sleep early tonight. I was gonna stretch and stuff, but I don't know, like I'm pretty tired. Which I know I said isn't a good way of looking at it, but I am sick, so I think I'll make a judgment call on that, and maybe save that for tomorrow. But yeah, that's it. That's it for tonight. Delta out.